Welcome back to Policy G. Take it from me, episode 3. I'm Rob here in the Brown Dog Studios, along with the star of the show, Susan Mogensen. How goes it today, Susan?
Pretty good. Thanks, Rob. It's funny you should refer to me as the star of the show because, as luck would have it, we're going to talk about egos today.
Egos. I thought your notes said we were going to talk about egos.
Not egos, egos. Are you still hungry from all that cheese talk last time?
Yeah, still thinking about that cheddar.
No, we're not going to talk about egos. This time, we're actually going to talk about muffins.
Muffins.
Yeah, you like bran muffins, Rob?
I don't know. Are there gluten-free brand muffins?
I doubt it, but that would be something to research for sure.
Or better yet, gluten-free brand muffin tops.
Oh,
Everybody
yes.
likes muffin tops. But
Yeah.
seriously, folks, what are we talking about today, Susan, besides muffins?
Okay. Well, we're going to start with the muffin story. Then I want to clear up a common misunderstanding attached to policy governance and wind up again with some suggestions for boards, whether they're using policy governance or not.
Sounds good. Let's get started. I'm in suspense about the muffin story.
I bet you are. Well, okay. This took place several years ago, and let's introduce the characters. There's me, and at the time, I'm working for a senator in the Canadian Parliament. And then there is my boss. We'll call that the boss senator who's in this story. And then there's another senator who has very strong opinions about things. We'll call her the host senator for this story. And then there's a third senator who is, let's say, a highly esteemed guru person. All right. So we have our guru senator, host senator, and my boss. And at the time, my job was to help shepherd legislation through the Senate of Canada. It was a pretty big deal. And there was one really big piece of legislation in particular that was going to be pretty challenging to get through. So we had to have lots of strategy meetings. And I was involved in organizing these strategy meetings. And I remember there was this one meeting where it was going to be held at the host senator's office with my senator, very active in the meeting, plus me and this guru person. And my boss said, now make sure for this meeting, we're going to have it at 8:30 in the morning. Make sure that you arrange for coffee and muffins to be delivered to the meeting. And I'm like, right, that was a normal thing. You have a morning meeting, and especially with this guru senator coming, we knew that he really liked his bran muffins. So it was important that we have all that set up so that we have the meeting with coffee and muffins. So actually, I didn't directly order the muffins. I asked the receptionist to put in the order. That was normally something she did. She knew exactly how to do that. So great. The order's put in. So now it's the morning of the meeting, and it's around the meeting starts at 8:30. We were all there, or I was there probably by 8:15. Make sure everything's set up, and the coffee and the muffins weren't there. And it's like, okay, well, normally they would have arrived by then, but they weren't there yet, so gave it a few more minutes. And then before the meeting started, still no coffee and muffins. And my boss was starting to get a little agitated because she knew that having a bran muffin and coffee was really important for this guru guy. So I checked with the receptionist, said, did you put in that order for the for this meeting? And she said, yeah, yeah, it should be on its way. I checked with them, it's on the way. So now it's 8:30, we have to start the meeting without any coffee or muffins. And I could just tell both the host senator, like it was in her office, and my boss were getting really agitated and nervous because here we are hosting this meeting and the guru guy's there and there's no coffee, no muffins. And of course, I'm kind of wondering what's happened and call the receptionist again and say, "Hey, now it's like 8:40. Where's the stuff?" And she said, I found out. I called them and found out that the messenger who was pushing the cart with the coffee and muffins on it had bumped into like a lip on the floor, and the whole coffee fell over and just spilled everywhere, and the muffins, and it was a big disaster. So she said that they were going back to get another carafe of coffee and another set of muffins to deliver to the meeting. So sorry, it was going to be a bit late. So I'm like, okay, well, life happens, right? So we carry on with the meeting, and eventually the coffee and muffins do arrive, probably closer to 9 o'clock now. but I'm just getting this bad feeling from my boss and the host senator. They're probably wondering, why is the coffee and the muffins, why are they arriving so late? And at this point, I hadn't had a chance, I hadn't really told them about the whole messenger thing and the cart turning over. But meanwhile, I mean, the meeting turned out to be really good. It was a good strategy meeting, and we accomplished everything we wanted. The guru senator participated, notwithstanding the absence of the coffee and the muffins. But afterwards, when we got back to the office, I got heck from my boss because she was apparently hearing it from the host senator. How come the coffee and muffins wasn't there by the start of the meeting? And then how it interrupted the meeting when it finally did arrive. I was getting the flack. And so I had to provide an explanation for what happened. And it was taken to be such a serious thing. And so I wrote out this 2-page memo on exactly who did what and why and what happened and the muffin cart overturning. And so that she could have that memo so she could explain to the other senator what went wrong. And I just came out of that experience, out of that day, so frustrated and so, I don't know, I just felt the whole thing was so bizarre. Like, who cares? Like, why is it being made into such a big deal? And why am I getting all this heck for, such a stupid thing? So that night, you and I, Rob, we had dinner. We were actually, you probably don't remember this, but we went out. I remember even the restaurant. And I told you this story about what happened in my day. And you listened to my story and you said, what you're experiencing there, Susan, is egos, a clash of egos, or very, very fragile egos. And that is something that is actually quite typical amongst politicians because they're always so afraid, nervous, sensitive about what they look like. So my boss was sensitive to what the host senator was thinking, and they were both very sensitive to what the guru senator was thinking. And so all of that kind of fragile ego stuff then landed on me, and I got heck for the muffins being late. So this was something, you helped me through that. You probably don't remember. Do you remember that at all, or?
Well, I'll say yes. It sounds like you remember this like it was
Well,
yesterday and not 25 years ago.
it does. Well, don't prematurely age me. It wasn't really 25 years ago,
You
probably.
were a student intern. Yeah, we know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was just a babe working in Parliament Hill at that time. But it did have an impact on me because I it really got me thinking about, why is it that some people care so much about what other people think of them? And is it true that politicians care even more than other people? Anyway, just the whole thing was so ridiculous, and it sticks in my mind. And the whole ego thing to me was a bit of another one of those moments where, if you're going to play your life on a film reel, you want to pause and think about, what did that muffin episode really mean? What did it have to do with anything?
Well, there's often, another story or an underlying issue or dynamics going on. So it's always interesting to see what might be at play there. So I know you always point out how there are people and personalities, and then there's process and systems. We can't really do much about people's personalities, can we? Because people are programmed to be who they are, pretty much.
Right. And I like, the optimist in me likes to hold out that people can change, but assuming people can't change very much, I feel like we do have to hang our hopes on good processes and systems and frameworks that are durable enough to hold all of these egos and human frailties and personal flaws, so we can still get stuff done. I always say in my workshops how both people and process are important, but if you have people with a lot of frailties and weaknesses, then at least if you have a good process, you have a fighting chance, because and can still get stuff done. The world is begging us to get stuff done.
That's right, including commercial breaks. So let's go do that and then come back with more.
You You want to make the world a better place, but how? So much to do, so little time. Well, serving on a board of directors is a great way to help create a better world, especially if that board has a clear system for achieving results. Learning how to be an effective board member used to mean reading big books and going to expensive workshops. But now there's engaging online training. The Board Accelerator is a web-based governance course that lets you learn at your own pace and place. Whether you're considering joining a board or serving on one now, the Board Accelerator gives you key insights and the confidence to be an effective board member. To learn more, visit browndogconsulting.com and click Book a Call. Talk soon.
All right, we're back. Susan, you said you wanted to clear up a common misunderstanding. What's that all about?
Ah, well, one of the most common misunderstandings around policy governance, and there are a few, but I think one of the ones that's most common is this idea of the one voice principle. The language of one voice, that phrase has really steered people off in the wrong direction. I'll tell you what the principle actually is, and I like to refer to it as the group authority principle. The group authority principle means that boards make decisions as a group, and no individual board member has any individual authority unless they've been given that authority by the group. And this is important because the board has a very powerful role. They get to direct and protect the organization, so they have to be able to articulate their values and policies very clearly so that on the receiving end, the staff get this direction and then will be using all the resources of the organization in order to achieve the results that the board asked for. So if you go astray from that and you don't have the group authority principle in play, you're in danger of having individual board members go around and tell staff what to do. So they're individually basically costing the organization time and resources doing something that's not really part of the direction that the board set as a whole. So, where people have gone wrong with the idea of this one voice principle is they say our board, operates with one voice in a way of meaning that all board members have to agree with each other, or that even after the board makes a decision that all board members have to say they agreed with that decision, or they have to stay completely quiet and can't say anything, even if they disagree with the decision. And that's not what the one voice principle means at all. Again, let's chuck out this idea of the one voice. In fact, let's just change the language right now. From now on, let's use group authority and down with the one voice. All right, good. Group authority. So it's important for boards to have a diversity of opinion that goes into the decisions that they make. And then once those decisions have been made, the direction that they send to the CEO or the operational side of the organization, or the direction that they set for a board committee, is established by the group, by the board as a whole, as a group. Now, what your board wants to do after that is up to the individual board. If, for example, you're the type of board that wants to have a very clear and controlled messaging process where, say, just one person speaks on behalf of the board and other board members always just refer to, say, the chair to make statements, you can do that. You can also have a board policy that says we won't speak out of turn. We will, in our public communications, we will always stick to our messaging. Or you could, as a board, choose to not go that route. You could have individual board members continuing to say what they want to say publicly with very little control or scripts or messaging behind it, and that's okay too. The thing is the board has to decide which way it wants to go, how it wants to do its public messaging. And so the principle of policy governance is about group authority. Diversity of opinion goes into making a decision. Once a decision has been made, it is communicated to either a committee or an officer of the board or to the CEO with as one direction. I don't know that we can use the term one direction, that's already been used. So I'm going to say group authority principle and just underscore that. And this actually goes back to the concept of the ego, that I think that if you have a fragile ego, the group authority principle is actually good because you don't have to worry that all the board decisions are all attributed to you as a singular person. You just contributed to the group decision. So you don't have to feel like you're going to be hung out to dry for a board decision because really it was a whole board decision and not just you. But anyway, did you have any thoughts about all of that?
Well, I think clearly the board needs to communicate, and whether that's the chair or a designated or delegated director to speak, it actually makes me think some of the bigger public boards should maybe have a dedicated communications person who understands all the ins and outs of policy governance and can explain it and can help the board with its public facing messaging and communications.
Yes, yes, that would be ideal if they have a budget for that, to have a person who understands the ins and outs of policy governance and can communicate from the board perspective without getting all jargony and confusing for people. If they know about policy governance and they're also able to communicate clearly from the board's point of view or help the board with its communication strategy, which is part of their ownership linkage plan, that would be ideal. I think a lot of, especially those bigger public boards you mentioned, need extra help with that. There are lots of cases that we read about online where angry board members or reporters or members of the public completely misunderstand how policy governance works. We've actually tried to reach out to some of them and say, no, what you're saying doesn't reflect actually how policy governance works. You're attributing it to policy G, but it's not really how it works. And we want to, help them or coach them and say, well, no, this is how it works, or this is what you could do.
So, why do you care so much?
Well, because misunderstandings like that form an artificial barrier to good governance. And a barrier to good governance is then a barrier to a better world and a better life.
All right. Well, I understand that. And here I thought the secret to a better life was a happy wife, but thanks. I'm here
True.
all week. Try the veal. Okay, let's take another quick break and come right back.
Discover a wealth of beautiful piano music composed by women throughout history, women who have rarely been heard until now. Go to pianomusicshewrote.com for several resources and to buy your copies of the newly published Piano Music She Wrote anthologies for elementary level pianists and piano students, edited by pianist Sandra Mogensen. That's pianomusicshewrote.com.
So, we've talked about egos and the group authority principle. What else do you have on tap for everybody today? Some advice?
Yes, of course. I always have advice. I want to talk a little bit about group facilitation as something that is, it's kind of like, I see it as a companion piece to policy governance. So, for those of you who are not familiar with policy governance, it's a set of 10 principles that boards use to govern effectively on behalf of their owners or key stakeholders. So, those 10 principles help the board do its job. But there are other things in life that can very nicely, easily connect to a board's use of policy governance. A separate thing like group facilitation, training, and skills. Because boards are in the business of making group decisions, they're a group of people making decisions on behalf of a group of people, usually. I think it makes sense for boards to really understand, appreciate, and use the discipline of group facilitation in their meetings, for example. You don't want to have the most dominant person, taking charge of all the decisions and nobody else says what they need to say. You want to hear from everybody, get that variety of opinions and perspectives to feed into good decisions. Again, going back to the group authority principle, the important part of that is that you have, say, 10, 11 board members. You want to hear from all of them before the decision is made. So then it's easier for everybody to, you know, go ahead with a good decision after all those perspectives have been heard. So if you imagine like a funnel, that's where facilitation comes in. If you think of all those different opinions, perspectives, and good information going through this funnel to get a good result coming out of the other end, you need to have good process to help all of those ideas and bits of information to kind of make their way through the funnel into a good decision. There are professional facilitators out there, obviously. I can't speak highly enough about the kind of work that they do because they help groups get past angry people, big egos, complicated issues, lack of focus. They really help to groups to boil things down. I've had a few experiences actually myself where, there's facilitating normal groups, like say a group of 10 or 12 or 15, and that's all fine. But the big challenge is if you try and facilitate large groups of angry people. I have had some good experiences actually with that. Not the muffin story, but there's another story where I was hired by a politician to facilitate a huge group of very, very angry constituents. They're very angry about a particular event. They all came to this big meeting hall, and there I was at the front of the hall with these people who just wanted to rant and rave and give heck to the various politicians that were there. And it was my job to facilitate a process with all of these people sitting at round tables first to help them kind of get out all of their issues, their concerns, their questions, and then after that sort of distill all of those issues and look at what was on everyone's minds in kind of a visible way. And we did that, and then afterwards, then the politicians stood up in front of the group and acknowledged their help in kind of going through this issue. And the people who were there, they changed. They went from being angry with their arms crossed to being engaged and listening and listening to each other and to the politicians and asking respectful questions. And it all turned out pretty good. So, I mean, that's kind of how facilitation can be useful again for those public boards that are facing a lot of angry people. You definitely want to have professional facilitators in there. But I'm also thinking about the importance of these skills for individual board members who could be asked to, say, take on a controversial policy decision that the board needs to make and figure out kind of an interesting way to work through that issue and come up with a good result or a good policy at the other end. The only kind of caution or hesitation I have when talking about facilitation and policy governance together is it really is nice if the facilitator understands policy governance as well, because a lot of facilitators come from a background of working with kind of your standard traditional strategic planning type stuff, which is great. But then when you get into that, there are some ways in which policy governance principles would have you do it a slightly different way. And anyway, we can talk about strategic planning more in a future session because there's a lot around that. I think facilitation skills are important for boards to be aware of, to learn, to study, and to use, especially when they're dealing with somewhat controversial issues.
So, how would you describe the ideal board member? Because surely they can't all have facilitation skills.
No, you wouldn't expect that. But it's good if you have a few when you're looking around, casting around for new board members. If you get a few that are familiar with various facilitation techniques. That's great. I think in your ideal board member, though, one of the things that you really want to find is people who want to learn, who are open-minded, who are willing to take everything up to a higher notch, who want to excel, not people who just want to rest on their laurels from everything they've accomplished in life and now they know everything they need to know and they don't need to learn anything else. You definitely want open-minded people, willing and interested in learning. Those facilitation skills are great. Being able to collaborate with other people, not being shy about expressing your opinion, knowing how to listen, being active listeners is hugely important. Being able to imagine the future, having some imagination and foresight, all of those things are really important. Actually, we talk about them more in our Board Accelerator Candidate Edition course. We talk about the function of governance and what kinds of qualities and skills lend themselves well to being a board member and being a servant leader, really.
So, besides studying and using facilitation techniques, are there any other tips or tools you suggest?
Ah, I wanted to mention that we have a few resources that might be helpful if you want to order them off the Brown Dog Consulting website under the products. One of them is called Meeting Helpers, and it's a book of messages that are very nicely graphically designed that you could use to show a question or a comment or some kind of message in a board meeting without interrupting somebody. And you could do this in Zoom meetings too. For example, I have a question. So, and instead of like waving your hands or, whatever, you're putting up your hand and holding it up forever, you can just show your I have a question card. Or if there's something where you think there might be a conflict of interest, you could flash that card. It says conflict of interest question mark. Maybe if it's time for a break, rather than squirming into your chair, you just flash that I think it's time for a break card. So that's one tool that we have, and another one we call values cards. It's a set of 10 cards, and they have two different messages, one on each side of the card. For example, one side of the card might say servant, and on the other side of the card it says leader. And we use these cards to help board members get to know what people's values are around the table. People that we've done this exercise where people put down the 10 cards with the word that speaks more to them facing up. And then you look at the different groups of cards that people have put down around the room, and you find that, hey, everybody on this board chose leader over the word servant, except for one. There's one person on the board who chose servant, and everyone else chose leader. And so then that stimulates a conversation about, well, why did you choose leader? Why did you choose servant? And the conversation that comes out of that values cards exercise is really, really interesting. Everyone's always enjoyed that and learned from it.
Great. Well, that's lots for now for this episode. Any parting words?
I would just want to say thank you, everyone, for listening. We're putting the show notes on our website. Just go to browndogconsulting.com and choose podcast. Definitely contact us if you have a question or an issue or topic you'd like us to address on a future podcast. Send us a voicemail or an email. And if we choose yours, the very first one we choose, we are going to send you a free copy of the original Meeting Helpers.
Oh, definitely want the original, except no substitutes.
That's right.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye for now until the next episode from the Brown Dog Studios. I'm Rob.
I'm Susan. Thank you for listening. Please share this podcast with your friends, colleagues, and fellow board and staff members. For the show notes, choose the podcast tab at browndogconsulting.com. This episode was produced by Brown Dog Consulting, hosted by Susan Mogensen and Rob Ludlow, and edited by Sandra Mogensen. Bye for now.